Hello there, everybody. It's Dr. Glenn Krieger here, your host of the OrthoPreneurs Podcast. Now, 2022 is certainly an interesting year for all of us on many levels, and I had some remarkable guests. And I thought, you know what? The messages and the emails and the comments I've gotten from all of you had made me think that maybe we should pull out the best of 2022 OrthoPreneurs Podcast and put it into a few episodes. And so that's what we're going to be doing, and that's what this is all about, is your favorite moments from the last year brought into small little snippets to help you sort of get a broader overview. And if you hear something you like, then go back and listen to that podcast in its entirety. But for sure, this podcast is what it is because of our amazing guests. And it would mean the world to me if you wouldn't mind subscribing. And please give us a shout out by sharing the Orthopreneurs Podcast and 5 Minute Fridays with your peers. Post it on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, or wherever you can, to get the word out there to let people know exactly what's going on and what it is we do. And with that, let's get started and have some fun. I want you to think about what you would do if you were in your first year of dental school and after a devastating motorcycle accident woke up in the hospital with permanent paralysis. How do you handle that? What do you do? Well, I can tell you this. While I don't know the answer for myself, Dr. Jeff Hines is a remarkable human being who overcame that and not only figured out how to survive it, but he thrives. He's an amazing person, great orthodontist, and a great leader. Proud to have him at this year's Orthopreneur Summit. But in this short clip, you're going to get to hear him talk a little bit about what went through his mind and how he overcame such an incredible challenge.
Everyone experiences their own version of hell in their life at some point. And has an opportunity to overcome and do better and grow from it. And mine was a little more extreme than most, but I think you'd be surprised at how resilient humans can be when they have a good support system and the right head on their shoulders and just a determination that you don't want to do anything different than your original plan. And however the hell it's got to happen, it's going to happen.
It's amazing, man. And I told you before we came on the air, I'm like, just tell your story, brother. It's so positive. It's such a great outcome. And I know that you're only on the first few chapters of the story that you're writing. And I said, no, I'm not going to dive into too many deep questions, about that. But I have to ask, in like movies, like Rocky, when Rocky's training, right? They show you 8 weeks of training in a montage to Eye of the Tiger that takes 3 minutes, right? And they don't stop to really realize, what really went on during training. Mm-hmm. And your story reads like that a little bit. I had this accident, my friends were in the room, we studied, I got through this, and I was really busy, but no doubt there were a lot of quiet times, right? Oh, yeah. There had to be. If you don't mind my asking, what was it that got you through those quiet times? Was it a competitive nature, I'm going to beat this? Was it a sort of optimistic nature? Some people would say there's a higher power that has a purpose for me. What was it that you went to deep in your soul, if you will, that sort of got you through those quiet times?
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of everything, a little bit of competitiveness. Or a lot of bit of competitiveness, if I'm going to be honest.
I don't know you well, Jeff, but I'm willing to wager that I did not want to get in the octagon with you, dude.
Yeah, definitely some competitive nature there. And I also had this, I have a very close relationship with my parents. My mom is my rock. She's been through a lot in her life. And there have been plenty of times, or there were plenty of times when we were sitting there and it just was too much. And, we'd hug and cry it out and just man, this isn't fair and why me and blah, blah, blah. And then I felt like if I let her down and I let my dad down, my dad's a very emotional guy, even though you think I'm big, he's a big dude, but he's a big softy deep down. And I just didn't want to let anyone down. And I also have this, it's funny how you start to get this relationship with time, but I have this fear of running out of time. And my belief is, we have this one life and we have to live it to our fullest. And I kind of just knew there's no in between here. I have two choices. Either I just roll over and give up, or I take this messed up hand that I'm dealt and go all in with it, And And that's what we did. And each time that I'd have a success or I'd get a good grade or I'd get passed or that next semester, it felt good. And it was addictive. And I think that's definitely why I kept thinking, maybe it's time to specialize or do more, and let's keep progressing this thing, because I wanted to just keep getting those accomplishments and achievements and not proving it to everyone else, but proving it to myself.
Yeah.
And just trying to live my best and fullest life and set myself up so that, no matter what comes down the line, I'm going to be happy.
Anybody who knows Dr. Bill Dissinger knows what a genuine, amazing human being is. His father, Dr. Terry Dissinger, also has impacted the orthodontic community in a huge way. But in this particular instance, he was talking about how the impact of remote monitoring and Spark aligners has changed his life and his practice life in a considerable way and created outcomes that are better. And trust me, when Bill Dissinger speaks about something like this, I definitely do everything I can to listen to it.
Well, our practice is completely different than what it used to be. My life is, I'm a crier. Trevor knows this.
Let it out, man. Just let it out right now. Just go.
I wish that I had this years ago. I feel like I could have been a better father. I could have been a better son. Could have definitely been a better husband. And it's not, there's a lot of people who's like, well, okay, that's great for you, but it's about just time in general. We all have the same amount of time, 24/7, 365, but how do we utilize that time? So by me transitioning to a heavy aligner practice and using dental monitoring, the time savings it has allowed me to take time for my family. But if you don't, if that's not what your thing is, or that you already have that going, but you free up more time, you can start another practice. You can start another business. You can grow your practice. There's just having free time is a commodity that most people don't get more of in our busy lives. On the braces side of it now, what we're starting to do because we started with just all aligner patients, and now that we've gotten that figured out over the past year and a half, now we're adding all of our braces patients on there. So now I'm doing wire checks or bite checks through dental monitoring, saving some appointments, but more importantly, it allows the freedom to schedule those braces patients on a non-doctor day if we need to, just for wire changes, because I've already done that. If there's bracket bondings that need to be done or loose brackets, and obviously I'm going to be there doing the brackets. But what it does is it's not just an advantage for me in the practice, but think about the patient. It gives more flexibility to when they can be scheduled. It gives them a lot of flexibility as far as how many times they have to come into your business to be seen. I know that we all like to think we're cool. Trevor is cool, but Glenn, you and I are not.
Thanks.
And people, people don't necessarily
I've heard of
want to see us.
self-deprecating humor, but I love it when you throw me under the bus with you. Like if we're in a boat and you go over, you're pulling me straight down with you. That was like, Trevor, you're cool. Glenn and I are like, how did I get roped into this one? Trevor, remind me never to go fishing or hunting with Bill, okay?
I think you're both cool, all right?
What I'm saying is that patients, if we could give patients a pill when they walked in for that new patient consult and said, hey, take this pill in about 6 months or so, your teeth are going to be straight, come back, we'll make a retainer for you.
Yeah.
They'd pay an infinite amount of money for that.
Yeah.
They don't want to come see us all these times. They're busy. So if we can provide them what they want, which is a great smile with straight teeth, and they're not coming to see us 15 times, they're coming to see us 6 times, that's a great service.
If you've been in orthodontics for even a couple of years, there's no way you could have avoided Alyssa Carter. Now, Alyssa, small town gal from a small town in Texas where she went back to practice, but is known globally for doing amazing orthodontics, her really positive energy, and the skill with which she practices and takes on all new challenges. Now, in this particular clip, she talks about how the efficiencies of remote monitoring and the power of artificial intelligence have brought data into her life in such a way that it's become a game changer. And she also is very cognizant of the waste that's been built into all of our systems and gives you some ideas about how we can avoid them.
So I'm a systems person, and I if I see a problem or frustration, I always try to go back to that and figure out, okay, tell me the process and where can we change it to get a different solution. And in that, I was presented an opportunity to start using remote monitoring through a study for a company, and then really dove in, because I'm a nerd, I guess, to all the things that didn't pertain to the study about the remote monitoring.
Right.
Like, wait, like we can do this in our practice. We can change this about our practice. It really becomes, if you want to get into it, a treatment philosophy. And so we do use dental monitoring, and that's a brand, but it's really the power of their AI, artificial intelligence that they have built and are continuing to build, that has changed my practice. And so remote monitoring is one thing, checking someone's teeth or taking pictures. And like I said, I like to delegate. So I don't want something to put more work on my plate. I want it to be taken off. And with our AI, you can set parameters of what you want to be alerted on. And it's all automatic, and it's all in your words because you typed the messages and your grammar. And same thing as OrthoPi, it's an employee that works 24 hours a day for me. They never quit. They do everything accurately. When they show up to work for you or when you sign on with them, they're fully trained. And so talk about efficiency. But what it has done, speaking of the word vulnerable, is it's made me very vulnerable, because you see the things that walk out of your practice in the first 7 days. And then you're like, holy crap, like I am failing as a leader. Like that's your first, and you have to be open to that. Like if you see that 45% of your brackets that are broken are lower right sevens, clearly there's an isolation issue before you, like it's not that every patient's breaking a lower right seven, it's you. Right. And you see a few patients walking out with open gates, or you see just things that you probably later would be like, well, what did the patient do?
And you blew my mind when you gave that webinar recently in the RD group, where you talked about open doors. Like, because to be clear, people tend to think of dental monitoring as a plastic, monitor. You use it for both wires and brackets and aligners. And, you mentioned in that webinar, which I did not record the way I should have.
We'll redo it. I'll get it re-recorded.
I feel horrible, but my point is, you were talking about like open doors, like you would see open, like, which we always wonder, like in efficiency systems, like in my practice, I had a couple of assistants for a period of time where, I know that cases took longer because I spotted things before they left that were, and did you, out of curiosity, did you find that the open doors were related to specific assistants, or was it everybody?
The ones that had multiple open doors, even worse, right? Yes, you fine tune. You're like, okay, one or two assistants just aren't understanding how to close the doors. And then I think about it, I'm like, I don't even know that I've ever taught them that. Like, I just expect them to know that from the other assistants.
Yeah, close the door.
And so, it's on me as the owner to do that. And so I can't even be frustrated, but it taught me, like, I need the total amount of waste, and that is naturally built into our orthodontic profession, that we are completely unaware of because it's just the way that orthodontics works. Like, you work up, speaking of the new Damon Ultimate bracket coming out, like this is going to eliminate this, but you work up like 5 wires to get this wire that like somehow engages in a rectangular slot, and then it still has a ton of slop. And so you're compensating with bends for that slop, whatever it is. And then it's just waste. All of that is waste, but it's normal. So we plan for it, like, hey, your treatment will take 20 months. And, 10 of those months, actually, you're going to find out are complete waste when you start looking at this. And so if a patient has an open gate or a tooth that just doesn't get a tie put on it, if it's a twin bracket, walks out, not only did you mess up what they're going to come in for next time, you can't do what you were going to do. You might have to drop down a wire because it's naturally built in, and you kind of accept it, even though it frustrates you a little bit, until you get it like that thrown in your face every time the patient scans. And then you start realizing, okay, how can we completely change our treatment philosophies for efficiency to make this different? And that's what we are starting to do. It's awesome. Simple that instead of power chain, can you use a scintilloid coil to close a space? Yeah, because you're going to know exactly when that space is closed, and you don't need to replace the power chain. So it changes everything. And I have not mastered it. And I hope to continue to go that way. And I hope that I can help develop protocols and share them with any orthodontist to make their lives easier and kind of give them, the few years we've been working on it, just hand that to them. Like, why do I make them go through that if we've already gotten that figured out?
One of the slickest talking favorite people in my life is Ty Ramsey. Now, you may know Ty because he used to sell CBCT machines for a living. He's later moved on to help doctors transition their practices. But when I have a question about anything CBCT, I go to this guy who holds a World Series of Poker bracelet and has the most interesting stories you'll ever hear. And he'll be on the stage at Orthopreneur Summit talking about lessons he's learned as a professional poker player and how they apply to our regular life. But in this particular instance, he's going to talk about some of the most basic and biggest misconceptions that people have when they think about CBCTs and the biggest mistakes that doctors make once they get it.
Probably some of the biggest mistakes, and these are becoming less and less, people are becoming more educated, but, probably the number one is the, I don't want to overdose everyone and radiation. There are tons of studies out there, and the radiation does vary somewhat between all levels, but on the radiation, if a kid bumps his head and goes to the emergency room and he's gets a head CT. And doctors do that routinely every day. There's a study that showed over 60,000 patients getting a head CT, and the number that they were proud of delivering, the radiation amount to the head was something like 2,500 microsieverts of radiation. And they do it all the time to little kids. And then, dentists, when they're doing a CBCT, it's going to, in general, broad brush, but in general range anywhere from just 5 microsieverts to about 250 microsieverts in general. This was from a lecture that I attended a few years ago, but there had never been an instance in court where there had been a causal relationship between any dental radiograph and cancer. And if you just do the research on all of that, disclaimer, I'm not a, expert at that, but I've done the research and I'm just quoting articles and whatnot that I've seen. But if anyone does the research on that, radiation is probably the biggest misconception. As the technology improves, and the radiation actually continues to get lower and the images, have continued to get better.
Yeah. By the way, well, on that topic, you're not selling CBCTs anymore, correct?
No, that's correct. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm not.
So I want people to understand you're not listening to a salesman trying to sell you a CBCT. Mm-hmm. He has no vested interest if you buy a CBCT. He literally gets asked this question by every orthodontist. Now, maybe you don't trust him. He doesn't have doctor in front of his name. Mm-hmm. If you saw the Orthopreneurs University course with Dr. Shiva Tagyani, which happened in the first half of 2022, she is one of the lead radiologists at Beam Readers. She said the same thing, that anybody who makes the argument, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, that radiation is the reason they're not getting a CBCT, it's an outdated argument. Mm-hmm. So she actually does have doctor and board certified in her name. And if you listen to her lecture, she will tell you it's a big misconception. And you should go watch that lecture. It's one of the greatest oral radiology lectures that's out there. And you just go to orthopreneurs.com and go click on her link and take that course. And it'll be 5 hours of education on learning about CBCTs and on seeing the most common findings, both in 2 and 3D. So I agree with you 100%. Rotating that conversation or pivoting a bit, what's the biggest mistake most orthodontists used in terms of not using their CBCT? Now, again, those out there who want to be haters, when I say about CBCT being for sales and growing a practice, I told you that's what it's all about, right? Mm-hmm. But we know that if you're going to pay a lot for technology, it needs to make money. You just don't do it because you're Mother Teresa.
And well, some people do. I mean, a nice side effect of that is that a lot of times you do make more money.
Arguably, one of the biggest frustrations that any of us in orthodontics have these days is the staffing issue. If you're anywhere near an urban or even a suburban area, finding great help has been reported as one of the biggest challenges and one of the potentially biggest existential crises that's going to face orthodontics. Now, how do you handle it? Well, you can continue trying to hire, which you should do, and find great people and incorporate them into your culture. But if you're like Dr. Bob Skopek, who you're about to hear, he talks about how he changed his practice from 11 chairs and 15 team members to 3 members and 3 chairs while doubling, that's right, while doubling his productivity with no reduction in quality of care. And trust me, this is a guy who is committed to good outcomes. So he went from 11 chairs and 15 team members to 3 members and 3 chairs while doubling productivity. Let's listen in.
My income per hour is so much more than it ever was 10 years ago with that big staff. I mean, we were busy, working hard. It's now it's so much more efficient and productive. It's different, but it's so much more efficient and productive.
Well, let's talk about that. So obviously we're going on the supposition, if you will, the basic tenet that the quality of care remains the same, right? We haven't changed anything there. So what are you doing these days? Give us some examples of what you've done to transition from, say, 11 chairs, 15 team members, to double your productivity with 3 team members and 3 chairs.
Well, the first thing is what you just said, is that the clinical care has to remain the same. And I'm now 93% clear aligner orthodontics. I don't like braces. I don't want to do braces. But I was Invisalign certified in 2000 when it came out. I did a lot of aligners back then. I put 90% of those people into braces to finish them up because I wouldn't do the job. And I've busted my ass the last 7-8 years to learn how to move teeth with plastic. And there's so many good instructors out there that know how to move teeth with plastic. And that was the first step for me, is if I'm going to do clear aligner orthodontics, I have to be able to do the same level of orthodontics that I can do with braces and wires.
Right.
So that was the first step for me. And that was a long, tough road. I've never been the smartest guy in the room. I'm in the room, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So I learned from all these smart guys about, how to move teeth with plastics. That was the first step. Second step was decreasing the time in the chair. And that's where we started the remote monitoring. And we've done remote monitoring now for a little over 4 years. Okay. And at this point, my average full 1.5 year case, we see about 5 or 6 times. We used to see them 18 to 20 times. So we've reduced the amount of time there in the office. Now, that required a lot of training, so we can build relationships through the screen, so we can build relationships virtually. We don't want people to think that we're like any other mail order. And that was part of the trick with that, is training the people we have and finding who's good at creating that relationship through the screen. Who's good at making these people feel like, yeah, you're still cared for and we're still here for you and we're watching you. So that was the second step, was remote appointments, not seeing that 80, 90 people a day coming in and having them stacked up. And then quite honestly, a lot of it's outsourcing the tasks. We outsource the exam calls. We're a texting office. I mean, we've eliminated probably 90% or more of our phone calls. We communicate through our dental monitoring app, Rhinogram app. We don't get voicemails much anymore. The phone doesn't ring. That's simplified things so much throughout the day.
If you're a regular listener to the Orthopreneurs Podcast, then you know that one of my more common themes is self-health, self-care, not just physically, but mentally. And no single episode of the podcast had more feedback to me than the one you're about to hear from Robert Trujillo. He's an orthodontist out of the Pacific Northwest who went through a lot of what many of us have gone through. He stopped enjoying practice and he felt burnt out. He was kind of done. Well, in this clip, he talks about his process and what he learned before becoming a life coach who now works with orthodontists and helps them live their best life.
since I started after that 6-month honeymoon phase, I recognized that I still loved it. Everything was great, but I recognized that I was like a little more tired than I should be when it came to like being at home. But I just kind of pushed through it and didn't really acknowledge those warning signs. And then about year 5, I started just kind of like asking myself questions like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, there were these thought patterns that were happening. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because burnout is such a, cliche term. It's like, oh God, I'm so burnt out. And it's completely different than like a diagnosis, where it's like pure emotional and pure physical and just mental exhaustion from maintaining a level of stress for such an extended period of time that those 3 realms basically just can't operate anymore. And the thoughts I were thinking were really just kind of not helping. It's like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't think I can do this forever. And then I started feeling sad. Like, this is my career. Like, I went to school, I borrowed a ton of money to do this. Like, this is what I wanted. And now when I think about my future, I start to get scared. Like, I don't know if I can do this for another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And,
can I ask you the question about that?
Yeah.
So when you were getting in the car to go to work, how many days a week were you working doing ortho? Not working on the practice?
I worked 3 to 3.5 days. I took 11, 12 weeks off a year.
Okay. So you were living a life of roughly 3 days a week, working give or take 40 weeks a year. So you're working about 120 to 130 days a year, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
When you get in the car in the morning at that point, are you getting in the car going, crap, I do not want to be going here today. I wish I didn't have to go to work. I wish I could stay home and not have to do ortho. Was it, number one, and was it ortho, or was it just the stress of life and everything coming on top of you? Could I at that moment have said to you, hey, Robert, here's job B. It's totally different. Just don't point your car towards your office. Go to job B instead, not ortho. Would that have made it easier, or was it something completely different emotionally? So question 1, did you get in the car and not want to go to work, or not want to get out of bed in the morning to go to work? And 2, was it the ortho? Was it or that particular practice that was causing it?
It wasn't that I didn't want to go to work. It was more the hopelessness that I wasn't going to feel alive again, or that I was going to feel like that authentic, like deep passion. When I showed up at work, I gave like 110%, and I had to ramp myself up. Sometimes I had to play music and really like get in the mode. And like there were times when I've even like sat in my car before walking in the office, just kind of like, okay, I'm going to show up, and then I just like walk through and it's really who I am, but it just felt like it just took so much energy. So I wouldn't have gone to job B because my commitment to my patients and, to the practice, it was more just the hopelessness of like, I have this pain and I don't know how to fix it. What was
causing that pain? Do you know in retrospect what was causing it?
Yeah, what was causing it, really is that my life was completely out of balance. And so, one of the things I have really discovered over the years is that we all have motivations to do something, and they're all driven by our human needs. So we all have like specific human needs that we have to achieve, or we have to meet in order to, that's what kind of motivates us. And what I learned is that, when we ask ourselves the question, like, what is the most important thing to me in the world? I would say, it's my family and my kids and my wife. And this is exactly what I want. This is the exact result I want. But then you have work where it's like, oh, I really want, to grow my practice to this amount. I really want to be a good leader. I really want to treat my patients the best I can and have this incredible culture. And yes, I wanted both of them, but my work was meeting my needs more than my family and more than my kids. And I found myself more motivated to focus my energy and everything towards work. And what I've learned in retrospect is that that's because it was meeting more of my needs of, certainty and adventure and significance and contribution and all of those things. So I was really kind of focusing my energy on that. Meanwhile, what was most important to me in my life, I was neglecting. I still was present with my family and, I love them and would do anything for them, but my daily actions were not congruent with that direction. And so I found myself really just kind of wrapped up in my work so much. And then I couldn't figure out how to not want that. Like, I almost forgot how to play with my kids because it was I feel more satisfied when I'm doing this progress towards this big work goal, even though that's so really it's all about clarity and knowing what exactly you want in your life.
If you're lucky enough to have Dr. Mark McClellan in your life, then you know that he's going to always push the boundaries a little bit related to how orthodontists invest their money. And he's got a great story in his podcast about why he ended up being this way. But for a man who can really see the positive in some very, very far-flung concepts with money management, here's a clip where he's going to talk about where to put money in high inflationary times, including his favorite area, hard assets. And if you don't know what those are, don't worry. He's going to explain it.
I always love having a lot of cash on hand, but I think if you're going to invest it, I think you have to invest more towards, in this high inflation environment, tilt that cash towards hard assets, whether it's real estate, whether it's crypto.
Collectibles.
Or collectibles. Yeah. Right. Well, there we get the NFTs, right? And so the hard asset space is one of the best ways to overcome this inflation that we're all experiencing now. And so as long as you always keep a decent amount of cash on hand for emergencies and stuff, then you can deploy those assets to, you take, cash on hand, slow money, but you want to turn that slow money into faster money by, using it in those areas that are going to hopefully overcome the economy at hand. And obviously in some economies, the stocks are better, but, we're in the environment now that the hard assets are better.
So let's talk about hard assets because I would love to dive in just a little bit. Define for those out there what a hard asset is.
Yeah, so there's different types of assets. There's paper assets like bonds and stocks, and hard assets are more tangible, right? And so hold them, feel them, see them. And so real estate's obviously that's a hard asset, and you live in it. You rent it, you can own it, you can charge people for it, and same thing with your businesses.
That's it's an income producing asset.
They're all these are all potentially income producing assets. And Uncle Sam loves hard assets, and they give you some of the best tax benefits to be owners of hard assets. You own your own business. It's the most powerful drawer in our model. And Uncle Sam loves small business owners. It's the fabric of our country. And so they will give you tax benefits to be a business owner. And the same token with real estate. They want you to own real estate because you build stuff, you buy appliances, you furnish the homes. It's really good for our economy. So hard assets are a very valuable place, and Uncle Sam realizes that. And so when you can touch and feel it, people like that value. Collectibles, gold, that's a hard asset. Boom. Silver, boom. You can feel it, touch it, and hold it.
So if you've spent time around Heather Hopkins, you know that she is brilliant and a visionary. This woman is a lot of things that I wish I were in terms of being able to be prescient about the future. She's made lots of predictions that have come true, and not the least of which is a lot of the technology we're seeing in day-to-day in our practices. So in this particular clip, she's going to talk about mass customization because of new technologies. And what does that really mean when it comes to patient outcomes? Enjoy.
Now we're finally to the point where we have the ability to do mass customization. You look at...
I love that line, by the way. Mass customization.
Yes, mass customization. Well, I mean, that's what, if you look at what Larry Andrews was trying to do with straight wire appliance, is that he was trying to take tweed mechanics, bending a wire for every single tooth was not efficient. So he established some universal norms, right? We're going to treat to the average. And they could mass produce that. They could scale that. That could be manufactured. Right. But it was treating to the average. So it allowed us as a specialty to grow exponentially. That's when it started to actually be fun to be an orthodontist. That's when you started having those applications to residencies skyrocket, because a lot easier than tweed mechanics for every patient. And it allowed us to scale until we hit a plateau again, right? because what happens is that we can't predict when we need to customize, right? When do we need a repo bracket? When are we going to have to bend and a wire? So there's this unpredictable portion of that then creates a new inefficiency in our practice. And so we are at kind of, for 20 years now, we've been at this level where we've improved our efficiencies. We can see more patients, but to maintain the quality of our outcomes, we can't really get past where we are, right? And now that opportunity is finally here. The technology is finally here to allow mass customization within orthodontics, right? With 3D printing, again, it's been what's driving all of this. It's what led to clear aligners. It's what's led to the bracket systems like Lightforce and KLON and braces on demand are all dependent on 3D printing. And so that allows you to scale, right? Scale custom. And anyone who's ever had an idea or even running our practices, a business, ideas are easy and, one-offs. It's when you have to scale it, when you have to create a system and actually scale it, that it becomes a challenge. And the ability to scale customization finally exists within our specialty. And, I had some information from Lightforce Orthodontics. They did an internal study looking at what is their average prescription, right? So they were looking at their average prescription. And so for lower incisor torque alone, what would you guess the standard deviation would be? What would you think would be a standard deviation for torque?
Using what as a measurement? Like you're talking about degrees of torque?
Yeah, so degrees of torque. Like if you were trying to think.
Right. So here's our average is our center and our two standard deviations are what 95% of people are using. So I would say deviation in torque would be 12%. Standard deviation would be 8% is what I would say.
Okay. So if you think about in terms of degrees for lower incisors, right? Most prescriptions are going to have -6, 0, or +6, right? And so if you had a mean of -1, if they found that the average was -1, so what do you think by 8%, what do you think would be the range of standard deviation?
It's tough because in a controlled environment is not real world, right? It's hard to go to every ortho practice, right? That's what I'm thinking about. But if you're going to go in controlled environment, I'd say one standard deviation would be if average is -1, I would guess that people would be anywhere from +3 to -5 would be a one standard deviation, with 2 being 7 to -9, right?
Yeah, and again, because that's kind of in line with what our universal prescriptions provide us with.
Right.
What they found is that it actually ranges from -11 to +9 was one standard deviation.
Wow, -11, so 10.
That's 10, one standard deviation. So that's 70%. Yes, 10 degrees. So 10 degrees.
And I said 8. So my first guess wasn't so far off.
No, exactly. And so when you think about just that level of variation, we can't bend the torque on every single lower incisor like that in our practices. So we really, to truly become the best orthodontist we could possibly be and deliver the absolute best outcomes to our patients, the mass customization that's available today is what allows us to do that. So it really, truly realizes the vision of what orthodontics always has been meant to be. And so it's really exciting that we can do that because now we can do it on a computer screen in a few minutes versus all that chair time clinically. And I have lots of orthodontists, I know that are amazing orthodontists and get great outcomes, but how much time do you spend chairside? How much of your day do you spend chairside in the clinic?
In total number, I have no idea. I couldn't even begin. I would say 2 hours and 40 minutes. I just making that up off the top of my head.
Yeah. So I had people that came to my office and they were timing me. Apparently I didn't even know it, but I put gloves on 3 times in a day. And it was less than 15 minutes in the whole day that I sat down, spent sitting down at a patient's chair, doing something in their mouth. And so that's where it's, when you look at that level of customization and it's already kind of been done and built into the brackets themselves or into the aligners themselves, then it really takes a lot of the stress out of your day. Just, whether it's even just being hunched over in a chair working or just the stress of everyone waiting on you. We're the bottlenecks in our day, right? We're the thing that slow us down is people are waiting on us to come chairside to customize their treatment. So by customizing everything up front, it's going to improve our outcomes. It's going to make us way more efficient and it's going to improve that patient experience because they're not running behind for appointments. It's fewer appointment times. I remember when there were bends in my wire and they'd snap that wire in. That's not a pleasant, that's not really the best part of orthodontics. And, unplanned repositioning and brackets off, all that. I don't have that in my practice anymore. And so those are the things that kind of get us off course during the day. And, once the wheels come off, like the whole day just goes downhill. Right. And so the difference that the way I practice that people don't necessarily see right away is that I'm not spending my entire day chairside. I'm like walking around, like talking to people. I can do clin checks. I can approve IDB cases. My entire OBS, recall, growth guidance, whatever you call it, program is non-doctor time. So we get a scan, a pan, and 3 extra roll of photos. We make it as convenient as possible. I'm a busy mom. I understand what it's like to have to, come into an appointment in the middle of the day and wait an hour to see someone to be like, hey, 2 thumbs up, great job, keep growing. It looks good.
Keep growing.
Yeah. We try to add value by giving t-shirts, and sending birthday cards. We could add value by making it more convenient, like letting them get the information they want, like on their terms.
If orthodontics needed a poster boy to illustrate to the public what we're all about, I don't think you could find anybody better suited for it than Dr. Trevor Nichols. Now, Trevor is a friend. He motivates me with his, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. If you take a look at him, he is a balance of lots of brawn and lots of smarts. And the way he looks at the world is really, really good. And in this next clip, he talks about how to best incorporate an associate into one's practice, both from the principal doctor and the associate doctor perspectives. And I can tell you, I implemented a lot of his advice when we brought someone into our practice. And so I hope you get as much out of this as I did.
For the principal doctor, the first you mentioned is especially in front of patients, adding value to the doctor that you're working with is really, really big. And the patients know you as the owner doctor, the father doctor, let's say, in the practice, and your words are gold. So the staff can say lots of things. The team can say, oh, Dr. Rasmussen is such a great orthodontist. We can't wait for you to meet him. But for you to say it means something different to the patients. And I think it's really important in working with any team environment, whether it be working with your clinical staff, but more importantly, working with another doctor in the practice. If you're team treating cases and you're Dr. Krieger and you sit down to the case and you look and you see, that Sally saw Dr. Rasmussen last visit, the first thing you can say to the patient is, hey, Sally, I know you saw Dr. Rasmussen last visit. He did such a great job. And I'm going to look at your case today and we're going to take another step further. It's looking beautiful. This is what we're going to do today. And those words will mean a lot to the patients, reinforcing what's great about that doctor. It may be something small, but reinforcing that treatment, whatever they did last visit, because the patients don't know. If you made a step in, they may see a tooth that's moved, but generally they don't know what's going on, So you telling them that he did a great job will mean a great deal.
Right.
The other part that's been really great for us that we've worked tough on and worked a lot on is, having some mentor-mentee relationships and discussing cases, taking photographs and discussing treatment plans every single day. And for the older doctor, right, to review some things that they may have seen with a younger doctor that could be done differently or were done excellent, also will go a long way in fostering that great relationship. And doing that in front of the team, I think, is also very important because you need that new doctor to have trust, from the entire team, because the more trust that you can relay in front of everybody, again, being as vocal as you can about the new doctor to the team and to the patients, the more that will be fostered. And when you talked about, name changes and things like that, really what it comes down to, again, is the patient and their experience. And again, it doesn't matter if they're partner associate, how much of the partnership or associate they are. You want the patient. What's best for the practice is for them to have faith in your associate or partner, whoever it may be. And you have to make that happen. It's a conscious effort as the owner doctor or father doctor to make that happen.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, on the younger doctor side, it's doing this very similar things, right? It's learning from the older doctor, asking questions consistently, studying cases every single day, older cases that have been done and cases that are currently in treatment, writing patients' names down. When I first started in the practice, and there were days that I was there that Stu wasn't, Dr. Frost initially, even from the get-go. And so I would write patients' names down if there were questions that I had, and we would review them, and we would build that trust together and learn together. But working the room is really big, working the community, calling, referring doctors, making visits, all the things that we know we should be doing, but doing them with intention and
Yeah.
acting like it's your practice, whether it is or isn't. If you're in the practice, whether you own a % of that practice or not, if you are the new doctor, you make it your practice. You pretend like it is yours, or you act like it is yours. You want it to grow like it's yours. You treat the patients like they're yours because they are your patients. And the more you can treat it like yours, like you have value there, then the more the owner doctor will see that, the more value you will bring, and the better the relationship between you and patients, the better it will go.
One of my favorite guests in 2022 was Dr. Mike DePascal. Great guy with a great history, dedicated to excellence in all things in his life. And if you watch him on any social media, you will see the kind of things he's doing, not only in practice, but in the gym as well. And so in this part, he's going to talk a little bit about how does one set a stretch goal and what do you really need to do to achieve it. And I think this is really important advice for everybody to listen in on.
People ask me often why I still do what I do. And I have a big stretch goal in CrossFit to make it to something called Wodapalooza, which is a big competition in Miami. I want to do that as a master's athlete, which actually starts at age 35. So I'm
35? What the heck am I? Group. At 54, am I like the elderly classification?
No, it goes all the way through that. It's kind of a low age to start. It's kind of funny, but to be honest, I probably never get there. It's a pretty lofty goal.
Not with that attitude, you aren't, Mike. Come on, man.
No, it's not. That's the point, though. It's not that like I'm trying hard every day to get there. But people are, when people ask me that and I say honestly, do you think you'll get there? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. There's a lot of, but some of the best CrossFit athletes in the world are my age. So they're all going to be there with me. But for me, it's about the process. And that's what I explain to everyone. It's about the journey to get there, all the stuff that I get to do on a daily basis, the people that I get to meet, the competitions that I do leading up to that, the stuff I learn about myself. So it's really not, to your point, it's not about the end goal for me at all. It's about enjoying the ride to get there and how I become better at things while I'm doing that. And if I ever get there, like you said, there's the next thing's going to be right there waiting for me, right? Your brain, you'll recover a little bit, you'll smile about it, and you're like, okay, cool. What's next?
In the last year, I was lucky enough to have some time to spend with Amy Demas. Amy is one of the most patient individuals that I've ever met in my life. She has great advice for people. She knows exactly how to tell you the right thing that you need to hear at that moment. But what she's going to talk about in this next clip is how what we think about our own skill levels, and always and never, what that means in terms of our success and how to increase our chances of getting better at everything we do.
So the Dunning Kruger effect is this thing that we're not good self-evaluators. Let's put it that way in short.
That's an understatement of the Dunning Kruger.
It is. When they ask 100 Americans, are you in the top half of good drivers, and 88 out of 100, mathematically impossible, say they're in the top half. Or if you ever watch on Netflix, the series 100 Humans, they actually put 100 people in black sweat tops and bottoms, no names, in big taped off squares outside. And they had these lab people saying, humans, look around. At the count of 3, raise your hand if you're in the top half of good looking compared to your neighbors. I think it was 90 of them raised their hand.
Compared to your neighbors.
So, we're not good self-evaluators, even though sometimes we think we're self-loathing. So here's what happens. We go to training and the mindset is we can be like a teenager. I know that. And my encouragement is to lean in, because if we don't, everyone says, I always, and I never. I always do that. I never do that. And reality is usually somewhere in between. And the way to overcome the Dunning Kruger effect, one is learn what a standard is, because you don't even know where the goal is. And the second, receive feedback.
Yeah.
There you go. And so that's what we do. And then sometimes as we get that feedback, it's almost better when the feedback is from somebody that's not emotionally attached. And so a lot of what I teach isn't necessarily rocket science, but because it's coming from an outside source, it's disarming from that aspect of it. It's why when I go to teach at a place, I never listen to any recordings of anybody before I show up. It's a part of trust for me. It's like when my nephew finally got to learn to tie his shoelaces, he said, Aunt Amy's going to help me. And he learned it in minutes when his mother couldn't learn. He couldn't learn from his mother.
Right.
And he turns to his mom and go, why couldn't you teach me that? And she's like, just be happy for him. And so that's, when I end those presentations, it's like when I was with you, I want to be like that Aunt Amy for your practice. That person that's the outside person that can provide that feedback in a disarming way.
But you do it in such a loving, inclusive way.
Thank
Claude
you.
Silver, who's spoken at Summit twice, who I love to death, she's the chief heart officer at VaynerMedia in New York, which is just a 2,000 person organization. She was there from nearly the beginning. She's got the biggest heart, arguably, of anybody I know, present company present company excluded. I'm saying that, Amy. And her cultural sort of rubbing on me is like love, right? And that's not who I am by nature. I'm a driver, right? I'm not a love on people, though I do love on people. Sometimes it feels contrived, right? But you do it in such a sweet, wonderful way that your teaching just comes across in the right way. And when you talk about self-awareness, I want to talk about two things here. Number one, the Dunning Kruger effect is in full effect in the ortho world. Right? Because you can see a lot of people who stand on a stage and lecture. And I want to say this now, I'm not thinking of any individual in particular. It's something I've noticed over the last 5 years that how much CE do they take? Now, I'm not saying how much CE do they go see a friend at. When you see some of these people standing on stage, how many courses do they personally go to a year? Or do they feel like they've mastered everything related to the world of orthodontics? I see it very commonly, and I've pointed it out I'm never going to mention names because I'm not thinking of anybody. I'm just saying, hey, orthodontists, you're accomplished, you're brilliant, you're very well-rounded. You may have been practicing for 10 years. You need to take more CE and more personal leadership and management courses. You need to learn more, right? Because you don't know what you think you know. And as a self-evaluator, you are not, one of the top 10% drivers. Right? Everybody thinks they are. So I'm just saying that to orthodontists and to myself, because I try to get to every course I can lay my hands on, because I will never, ever, ever, ever stop learning. Right? And so that's number one. Number two is, how do you take this whole concept of feedback and apply it when the current crop and generation of team members, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, is radically different in terms of skills and goals and the way they take feedback versus even 3, 4, 5 years ago. Nowadays, it appears if you even with love and kindness and a personalized massage from a massage therapist and getting their nails done and a pedicure at the same time, and you ask them to please make sure they come back 3 minutes earlier from lunch, they don't even show up after lunch is done. They never come back. How do you handle that? And this is not endemic just to orthodontics. This is across the board. How do you give feedback today? Or do you think this is crazy and it's exactly the way it's always been?
No, I fully agree with you. And one of the things that I think that helps in my unique ability, one, I've gained the trust, but then because I use their actual recordings, I show to them, I'm looking for your trends. I am not trying to get in there and play gotcha to you. And when I listen to those recordings, I'm playing back clips. So I said, here is the standard. So this is refuting the Dunning Kruger. Here's the standard. All right, let's go in and see where your baseline is compared to that. And you play 4, 5, 6 clips, one after the other. So they're not listening to the entire conversation. It's just like bang, 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 bang. That serves like a mirror to them. And you know what it's like when we sit here in front of Zoom. We get on Zoom, we did our hair in the morning, we get on Zoom, we go, oh my heavens, what? And that's almost the sensation that I get when I work with them. They go, oh, I didn't realize. Yeah. And so we're celebrating the wins. And it's not me saying it, it's the mirror saying it, it's the recording saying it. And so that's disarming, which, Glenn, I know we know this. When we have an issue, when we put it in between us, it's a problem. When we put the issue out to the side, we're both then evaluating it. And those recordings are a way to take that and put it out in front of both of us and see how we can work on it instead of between us like an argument.
One of the most interesting guests I had on the show in 2022 was Anne-Marie Gorsica. Now, She's an analog woman. She does a lot of her stuff using paper and pen. And at first gloss, you might say, why would you do that? But she illustrates the reasons why you can run a really effective, well-run, and profitable practice using her ideas. She's the author of numerous books. And her point in this next clip is that the bottom line is cash flow. And she discusses how to increase, to have a better salary, specifically through effective treatment coordination. Listen in. I hope you enjoy.
The bottom line is cash flow. The bottom line is, what's your salary? It doesn't matter how big your practice is or how small your practice is or how many locations you have or how many assistants you have. The bottom line is, what is your salary? And we are working to earn a salary. So in that arena, treatment coordination is extremely important because it brings you your patients and it brings you your cash flow. And your cash flow is the fuel which runs the engine of your practice. And when I look at treatment coordination, it's not just what goes on in the exam room. Sure, that's part of it. But it really is like a circle, which has three major sections. The first is engagement with the community, with the new patient, with the referring doctors, getting the new patient in, having influence, and conducting the exam for the goal that the patient signs up and starts treatment that day. The next area is follow-up. If the patient doesn't start treatment, you have to convert the case. And what are the action steps that you're going to take to be as successful at that as possible? And then the third aspect of treatment coordination is delivery of services. And that includes just a seamless process of financial arrangements, including collections, and maximizing your collections, both with the patient and both with the insurance company, and then also maximizing your referrals.
Got it.
So treatment coordination is quite broad, and it's an important, it's everything really. I mean, it's the fuel of your engine of your practice.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of energy and effort put into any of the numbers of sections you've talked about. And we tend to focus on one thing or not another, right? Hey, I'm really into marketing. I'm going to throw everything I've got into marketing this year. I'm going to get a ton. And there's been no training to the TC on the back end, right? Mm-hmm. The TC just sort of sits there and says, well, she's amazing. She's good at what she does. Mm-hmm. But what kind of formal training have you given this TC? And I'd love your input on that one.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Glenn, it's a characteristic of being a fantastic TC. All you need is a winner's mentality of persistence and being friendly. The best TC I've ever had, I've had about 8. And the best TC I ever had 0 training. She had a winner's mentality. She was a go-getter. She printed out the pending list. I didn't even have to ask her to print out the pending list. She just automatically knew, where are my patients? Where are my follow-up? And she walked around my office with a clipboard, continuously staying in contact with our pending list and getting those patients to start treatment. She made our office goal the first month she worked.
It's amazing.
And she had 0 training.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of our best of 2022. If any of these podcasts caught your ear and you liked what you heard, go back and listen to them. They're easy enough to find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Go to YouTube, we're there as well. And please, before part 2 comes out, go right now and give a shout out to this episode on your social media. Post it, tell people about it, because my whole goal here is to just help orthodontists and anybody else listening lead the most profitable, low-stress life they possibly can. And so thank you for a great 2022. And we should have part 2 out to you in the not too distant future. Have a great day.